Welcome to Martha's Stories. The banquet hall at the Royal Windsor smelled like expensive wine and my mother's perfume, the same floral blend she had worn every single day of my life, the one that was supposed to smell like sophistication and mostly just smelled like expectation. I sat at the far corner of the long family dinner table, the corner I had claimed for myself over years of practice, the seat with the best exit angle and the least visibility. I had learned a long time ago that the safest place at a family dinner was slightly out of frame. My sister Elena was holding court at the center of the table, exactly where she always was, exactly where our parents had always positioned her. Her diamond engagement ring caught the candlelight every time she moved her hands, which was constantly, because Elena talked with her whole body when she was performing and she was always performing at family dinners. Our parents sat on either side of her like matching bookends, my father's hand resting on the back of her chair with the proprietary ease of a man presenting his finest achievement. "Tell them about the venue, darling," my mother said, and she was practically humming with pride. Elena's smile was the kind that photographs beautifully. The Hartwell Grand. Daniel's father secured the main ballroom. "It is going to be absolutely extraordinary." Daniel Park, my father announced to the full table of aunts and uncles and cousins who had gathered for this particular performance. Senior partner at Hartley and Associates, one of the most respected law firms in the city. His father sits on the board of 4 major financial institutions. I moved a piece of salmon around my plate and made myself a little smaller, which I was very good at by then. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you are listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. My name is Lauren Reeves. I am 28 years old and I am an aerospace engineer. I design navigation systems for communication satellites. I am currently the youngest senior systems architect at my company, leading a project that will provide broadband internet to over 200 remote and northern communities across the country. At family dinners, I am the one at the corner of the table trying not to draw attention. "So, Lauren," my Aunt Patricia said, leaning across the table with that specific smile that means the question is not actually a question. "What is it you do again?" "I always forget." The table went quiet in that particular practiced way that told me everyone already knew the answer and was waiting to see how I would deliver it. "I am an aerospace engineer," I said. "I work on satellite navigation systems." My father made a sound in his throat. A small dismissive sound, barely audible, but I had been hearing it my entire life and I knew exactly what it contained. "She works in some industrial facility out in the business park," he said to the table. "Not exactly dinner conversation, is it?" "Dad. I design navigation systems for communication satellites. I am currently leading the development team for a national connectivity project." He turned back to the table with the patient expression of a man being interrupted. "Always so sensitive," he said. "Can't just have a normal conversation without turning it into a resume." My mother reached across to squeeze Elena's hand. "At least one of our girls understands what really matters." Elena worked so hard to build the right connections, to present herself properly. That is what opens doors in this world. My cousin Bradley leaned in with the easy grin of someone who has never once wondered whether he was welcome in a room. "Maybe you will meet a nice engineer at your facility, Lauren. Someone on your level." The table laughed. I kept my face very still and said nothing. I had 28 years of practice keeping my face very still. "Actually," I said, after the laughter faded just enough, "I was recently promoted to senior systems architect. I am the youngest person in the company to hold that title." "That is wonderful, sweetheart," my mother said, her voice bright and completely empty, the way a room sounds when all the furniture has been removed. "Now, Elena, show everyone the wedding invitations. They just arrived yesterday." Glossy cream cardstock with embossed gold lettering passed around the table to a chorus of appreciative sounds. I did not reach for one. I already understood, without being told directly, that I was not entirely expected to need one. Later, after the dinner plates were cleared and people were nursing coffee and dessert, Elena pulled me into the hotel corridor. Her heels clicked against the marble like small controlled detonations. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low and careful. "About the wedding." She would not look directly at me, which I had learned over 28 years meant she was about to say something she already knew was wrong. Daniel's family is very traditional, she said. Very conscious of image. Very particular about how things appear. His parents are hosting the rehearsal dinner at Olio next week. Everyone who matters will be there. Business associates, influential people, his entire extended family. I waited. Elena twisted her engagement ring in a slow circle. The thing is, I think it might be better if you did not attend the wedding or the rehearsal dinner. You could say you have a work commitment, which honestly would not even be a lie for you. I will make sure you get photographs. I looked at my sister for a long, very still moment. You are uninviting me from your wedding. Do not be dramatic. I am being practical. When people ask what my sister does and I have to explain that she works in an industrial facility building pieces for satellites. I design them, I said. I design the navigation systems. There is a meaningful difference. See, this is exactly the problem. You are so defensive. Some careers are simply more presentable than others. Daniel is a lawyer. His brother is a cardiac surgeon. His sister is married to someone who runs a hospitality group. What am I supposed to say when they ask about you? I felt something shift inside me. Something cold and permanent, like a weight settling into its final position. You could say I am an aerospace engineer with a master's degree and 3 published research papers on orbital mechanics and satellite navigation. You could say I am leading the navigation team for the largest satellite constellation in this country's history. You could say I am actually quite good at what I do. Elena's expression hardened. You work in a warehouse and you are not married and you do not fit the image Daniel's family has certain expectations about. This is the most important day of my life. For once, can you please not make everything about you? She walked away before I could answer, her heels clicking all the way down the corridor and around the corner until the sound disappeared entirely. I stood alone in the marble hallway for a long moment. Then I took out my phone and sent a message to the only person I knew would understand it without explanation. Family dinner. Full catastrophe. Call me when you can. Dr. Maya Singh had been my university roommate for 4 years and my closest friend for 8. She had gone on to complete her doctorate in astrophysics while I had gone into industry, and we had maintained the kind of friendship that does not require regular contact to stay intact. She was the person who answered messages at midnight without needing context and never once made me feel that my problems were not worth her time. I was halfway through a cup of tea in my apartment, the one I had bought 2 years ago with my first major bonus, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows and exposed brick that my parents had found deeply inappropriate as a real estate choice, when Maya called. Tell me everything, she said without preamble. I told her. The dinner, my father's dismissal, Elena's conversation in the corridor. Maya listened without interrupting, which is the rarest and most valuable quality in a person. She uninvited you from her own wedding, Maya said when I finished. Because you are an aerospace engineer. Because I work in a warehouse, apparently. You are designing systems that will provide internet connectivity to remote communities who have never had it. You are doing work that will genuinely change people's lives. And your family is embarrassed by it because it does not come with a corner office and a designer wardrobe. Ah. I know. I know all of that. Are you okay? I thought about it honestly. I think I am done, I said. I have spent my entire life trying to get them to see me, to understand what I do and why it matters, and they simply never will. Elena is probably right. It would be easier for everyone if I just did not show up. Do not say that, Maya said firmly. Why should you keep showing up to be dismissed and minimized by people who are supposed to love you? If you want to skip the wedding, skip it. Send a gift. You do not owe them your presence when your presence costs you this much. We talked for another hour about work and the satellite project and everything except my family. When we finally said goodnight, I felt something I had not expected to feel. Lighter. As if naming the exhaustion out loud had removed some of its weight. I decided I would not go to the wedding. I would send something beautiful and impersonal, and I would be busy that weekend, which would not even be untrue. The satellite project was entering its most technically demanding phase, and I had been working 80-hour weeks for the past 3 months. I turned off my lamp and lay in the dark of my apartment, looking at the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and I thought about what it would feel like to stop waiting for people to see you. It turned out it would feel something like relief. Have you ever been made to feel small by the people who were supposed to celebrate you the most? Drop a comment and tell me where you are listening from. I want to know how far this story has traveled. Stay with me. Because 3 days after that family dinner, at 7 in the morning while I was reviewing telemetry data at my desk, my phone rang from an unknown number. And what happened next changed everything. Part 2 is coming, and I promise you it is worth waiting for. 3 days after the family dinner, I was at my desk at 7 in the morning, still in yesterday's thinking, surrounded by telemetry readouts from our test satellite cluster when my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. Lauren Reeves, I answered, my eyes still on the screen. Miss Reeves. A woman's voice, carefully measured, warm but precise. This is Catherine Park. I am Daniel's mother. I hope I am not disturbing you. I sat up straight so quickly my chair rolled back. Mrs. Park. Not at all. How can I help you? I got your number from Elena, she said. I wanted to reach out to you personally about the rehearsal dinner next Friday. I understand there may have been some confusion about the guest list. Here it comes, I thought. She is calling to confirm that Elena's version of events is correct, to close the door politely and officially. I braced myself. I want to clarify, Mrs. Park continued, her voice still perfectly even, that we absolutely expect you to be at the rehearsal dinner. In fact, I was hoping we might seat you at the head table with the family. I genuinely thought I had misheard. I'm sorry? The rehearsal dinner is at Olio. 7 o'clock. I will have a place card made for you specifically. We are very much looking forward to meeting you properly. Mrs. Park, I said carefully. I think there may be some confusion. Elena mentioned that it would be better if I did not. I know what Elena mentioned, she said, and for the first time there was a very slight edge beneath the warmth. I have spoken with her about it. You are her sister. You will be at the rehearsal dinner. There is no further discussion needed. I sat in silence for a moment, genuinely uncertain how to respond. There is actually a particular reason I wanted to reach out to you personally, she continued. My brother-in-law, Robert Morrison, is the president of Apex Aerospace. I believe you are familiar with the company. My heart did something irregular. Apex Aerospace was one of the largest aerospace contractors in the country. They were currently pursuing several major government satellite infrastructure contracts and were widely considered the most technically sophisticated private space systems firm operating domestically. Yes, I managed. I am very familiar with Apex. Robert mentioned that your company is working on the Northern Signal satellite project. He has been following the technical development with considerable interest. When Elena mentioned that her sister was an aerospace engineer, I made the connection and confirmed with Robert that you are in fact leading the navigation systems team. I am, I said. Then I am even more insistent that you attend the dinner. Robert will be there and I know he would very much like to speak with you directly about the project. He has said some genuinely impressive things about the technical work he has reviewed. After we said goodbye, I set my phone on my desk and looked at it for a full minute without moving. Then I called Maya. Plot twist, I said when she answered. Tell me. Daniel's mother just personally invited me to the rehearsal dinner. His uncle is the president of Apex Aerospace and wants to discuss my project with me. Maya's silence lasted about 3 seconds. Then she made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a gasp. Oh, Lauren. Oh, this is going to be something. You are going, right? You absolutely have to go. Vanessa is going to be furious. I mean Elena. Exactly. The universe is handing you something here. Daniel's family wants you there. They are genuinely interested in your work. Your own family spent years treating you like an embarrassment. You have to go. She was completely right and I knew it. Fine, I said. I am going. But I am buying a proper dress first. If I am doing this, I am doing it right. Maya's laugh came through the phone like sunlight. Go buy the most beautiful dress you can find. You have earned it 10 times over. The following Friday I left the office at 5, which felt almost transgressive given my recent schedule. I had found a dress at a boutique near my apartment, a deep midnight blue that felt confident without trying too hard, professional without being stiff. I had my hair done properly for the first time in months. I even bought new shoes, which felt extravagant and right. When I walked into Olio and the host led me through the restaurant to the private dining room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city at dusk, I felt something I was not used to feeling when I was about to see my family. I felt ready. The room was already warm with people and conversation, the low sound of a room full of accomplished people doing what accomplished people do at these events, finding each other, assessing each other, connecting in the specific way of people who are used to being worth knowing. I spotted my family immediately. My parents were talking to an older couple near the window. Elena was at Daniel's side, perfectly positioned, her hand on his arm, her smile exactly right for the room. That smile faltered when she saw me. She excused herself and crossed the room, Daniel following quietly behind. "Lauren," she said. Her voice was very controlled. "What are you doing here?" "I was invited," I said. "Mrs. Park called me herself." Elena's face went the specific pale of someone whose careful plan has just developed an unexpected variable. I specifically explained to Daniel's mother that. "Elena," Daniel said, putting a gentle hand on her shoulder. His voice was mild but clear. "My mother invited Lauren. She is family and she should be here." "But I explained her situation to your mother. The thing about her job and—" "Her job," Daniel said, and now there was something definite in his voice, "is that she is the lead engineer on a satellite project my uncle's company is very interested in partnering on." My mother was actually quite pleased to make the connection. Elena looked between us. She opened her mouth. She closed it again. Before she could find her footing, a tall woman in a beautifully cut black dress approached with the warm confidence of someone comfortable in every room she enters. "You must be Lauren," she said, extending her hand with a real smile. "I am Catherine Park. I am so glad you could make it." "Thank you for the invitation, Mrs. Park. Please call me Catherine. Come, I want to introduce you to Robert before dinner starts. He has genuinely been looking forward to this all week." She guided me away from Elena across the room and I did not look back. Robert Morrison was in his early 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, the kind of man who has spent decades building something real and knows immediately whether the person across from him understands what that costs. His face lit up when Catherine brought me over. "Miss Reeves. Excellent. I have been wanting to speak with you in person. Your technical papers on satellite orbital mechanics and collision avoidance systems are some of the clearest thinking I have read in this field in years." My cheeks warmed. "Thank you. That is very generous." "Not generous. Accurate. Tell me about the navigation architecture for Northern Signal. I have seen the broad strokes in the technical proposals, but I want to understand your thinking on redundancy systems for the first constellation phase." And we were off. Into the deep water of the work I loved, the beautiful complex technical challenge of designing systems that had to function perfectly in the most unforgiving environment that exists, the vacuum of space, with no margin for the kinds of errors that can be corrected on the ground. Robert asked sharp, precise questions that showed he genuinely understood the field. He pushed back on two of my design choices with intelligent counterarguments that made me think harder and respond more carefully. It was one of the best technical conversations I had had in months. I was so absorbed that I did not realize the room had quieted until Robert paused mid-sentence and looked past my shoulder. "Ah," he said. "There you are. Lauren, have you met my wife Evelyn?" I turned to find a woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes that were currently bright with amusement. James has been talking about your work since Tuesday, she said. I was starting to consider it a rival. Everyone at the table laughed and the moment settled into warmth. But across the room I caught my father's face. He was watching me with an expression I had never seen there before. Not pride exactly. Something more complicated. Something that looked almost like recalibration. Has anyone ever seen your value before your own family did? Tell me how that felt. Leave a comment. I genuinely want to hear it. Do not go anywhere. Because I was seated at the head table that evening, 3 seats from Elena, and what happened over dinner was something I had spent 28 years not daring to hope for. Part 3 is on its way. Catherine had not been making a figure of speech about the seating arrangement. My place card was at the head table, between Robert Morrison and a doctor named Priya, one of Daniel's cousins. Elena was at the same table, 3 seats away, and I could feel her eyes on the side of my face throughout the appetizers the way you can feel a draft from a window that is not quite closed. My parents were at a different table, seated with some of Daniel's business associates near the far side of the room. So Lauren, Priya said as the first course arrived, her voice genuinely curious. I hear you are working on satellites. What is that actually like? It is, I said, searching for the honest answer rather than the modest one, the most interesting problem I have ever tried to solve. Lauren is being careful, Robert said from my other side, and his voice carried warmth and a kind of pride that felt strange coming from someone I had known for 45 minutes. She is leading the navigation team for what is going to be the largest domestic satellite constellation in this country's history. When Northern Signal goes live, it will provide high-speed internet access to over 200 remote communities that currently have none. Priya's eyes went wide. That is incredible. How did you end up in this field? I found myself telling a story I almost never told in my family's presence because my family had never created a space where it felt welcome. About building model rockets in the backyard when I was 9. About the specific feeling of watching something you built leave the ground. About choosing aerospace engineering because I wanted to spend my life on problems that were genuinely hard and genuinely worth solving. Your family must be so proud, said Evelyn Morrison from across the table, and she said it with such natural warmth that the question did not feel pointed. The table went quiet. Not dramatically, just for a beat. I glanced down at Elena who was suddenly very focused on her plate. They have always been supportive, I said carefully. Catherine gave me a very brief look that told me she understood exactly what that sentence contained and what it left out. Traditional is overrated, Robert said. What is not overrated is actually contributing something meaningful to the world. You are doing that, Lauren. Genuinely. You should let yourself feel that. The conversation moved forward, as dinner conversations do, and I breathed through the moment and came out the other side of it feeling oddly steadier than before. Later, during coffee and dessert, my mother found me. She approached with the careful expression of someone who has just discovered that the map they have been using is significantly inaccurate and is not yet sure how to proceed. Lauren, honey. She kept her voice low. Why did you never tell us properly how important this project was? What you were actually working on? I looked at my mother. I really looked at her, at the woman who had spent 28 years of Sunday dinners talking over my sentences, who had called my work tinkering, who had squeezed Elena's hand while I sat at the corner of the table being small. I tried, Mom, I said. Multiple times. Over many years. You were not interested. That is not fair, sweetheart. We have always supported your career. You called it working in a facility. Dad said it was not glamorous. You have spent years making it clear that what I do is not the kind of success that matters to you. We just wanted you to be happy. To be settled. To have the kind of life that. I am happy, I said. I am genuinely, deeply happy in my work. I am successful by every real measure. I am just not successful in the way you wanted me to be, and for a very long time I let that feel like a personal failure. I am working on stopping that. My father joined us, his expression carrying something I had not seen before. Something that looked like discomfort, but the productive kind, the kind that comes from a realization you cannot undo. Robert Morrison seems very impressed, he said. He is familiar with the project. You could have told us you were working on something of this magnitude. I looked at my father steadily. I did tell you, Dad. At the last 3 family dinners. You redirected the conversation to Elena's wedding each time. Once specifically to the wedding invitations. He had the grace to be quiet for a moment. Elena appeared at my elbow, her voice low and tight. You are making this into a spectacle. People keep asking about you. Talking about your work. This evening is supposed to be. Elena, I said quietly. I did not ask for any of this. I came because your mother-in-law invited me personally after you made it clear I was not wanted. I have answered questions when asked. I have not sought attention. If people find the work interesting, that is not something I am going to apologize for. You could have told them you were just an engineer. Kept it simple. Not made yourself sound like you were doing something historic. I answered questions honestly, I said. That is all I have done all evening. I am not willing to make myself smaller to make you more comfortable. I spent too many years doing that already. She walked away without answering, back to Daniel, back to the role she had rehearsed for this evening. My mother touched my arm. She is just under pressure. The wedding. No, Mom, I said. She is ashamed of me. She has been for years. And you and Dad made that easier for her, not harder. You created the environment where that was the acceptable response to what I do. And now you are surprised that other people see things differently. I excused myself and walked to the washroom, needing 60 seconds alone with my own reflection. When I came back out, Catherine Park was in the corridor. I did not mean to create tension, she said. You did not create anything, I said. This has been accumulating for a very long time. You just happened to be present when some of it surfaced. She nodded. She seemed to consider her next words carefully. Vanessa, Elena, told me you might not come to the wedding. That she had suggested you would be more comfortable not attending. Yes. She uninvited me. She said I did not fit the image your family expected. Catherine's expression did something very controlled and very clear. I see. That explains certain things. Lauren, I want to say something and I want you to actually hear it. When Daniel first brought Elena home, I did what I always do. I learned about the family. I found your research. Your published work. Your project. I was genuinely excited about the prospect of meeting you. When Elena kept finding reasons why you would not be at events, I found it strange. Now I understand. She paused. You do not need their approval, she said. What you are building, the real thing, the satellite work, the communities that will have connection because of what you did, that is not dependent on whether your parents mention it at the country club. It is real regardless of whether they see it. I stood in that corridor for a moment after she excused herself, alone with the marble and the quiet, and I felt something loosen in my chest that had been wound tight for a very long time. Ah. Some kindnesses from unexpected people hit you so precisely in the exact place you needed them that you have to hold very still to absorb them properly. Then Robert Morrison appeared at the end of the corridor. Lauren. Good. I wanted to catch you before the evening ended. Apex is going to be submitting a bid for the second phase of Northern Signal. We are looking for experienced technical leaders, people who understand both the engineering challenges and the larger mission. I would like you to consider having a conversation with us about what a role might look like. I held his business card in both hands and looked at it for a moment. I would very much like that conversation, I said. Good. I will have someone reach out next week. And Lauren. He paused. The work you are doing matters. It is the kind of work that will still be mattering long after the people who do not understand it have been forgotten. Has a stranger ever seen your worth more clearly than your own family? Tell me in the comments. You are not alone in that experience. Stay for part 4. Because the elevator ride down at the end of that evening, just me and my parents and 45 seconds of forced proximity, was the conversation I had been practicing without knowing it for 28 years. Do not leave now. The evening ended the way these evenings end, with goodbyes extended by one more conversation, one more introduction, one more moment of connection that you want to hold on to a little longer than the occasion officially allows. I thanked Catherine and Robert. I congratulated Elena and Daniel, genuinely, because whatever had happened between Elena and me, the wedding was real and Daniel seemed like a genuinely good person. I collected my coat and made my way to the elevator. My parents were already there, waiting for the car to arrive. The three of us stood in a row watching the numbers change on the display above the doors. 45 seconds, give or take. It felt considerably longer. That was quite an evening, my father said finally, his voice carefully calibrated to neutral. It was. Robert Morrison seems like an important person in your field. He is. His company may be bidding on the second phase of my project. He indicated he would like to discuss a potential role. My mother touched my arm with the tentative gesture of someone reaching towards something they are not certain will hold their weight. Jordan. Lauren, sweetheart. We really are proud of you. We always have been. I looked at my mother in the pale elevator light. I looked at her the way you look at someone when you have decided to stop pretending to believe things you do not believe. Mom, I said. Elena uninvited me from her wedding. Not to protect me. To protect her image. You and Dad have spent years dismissing my career, minimizing what I do, making jokes about warehouses at dinner tables in front of extended family. You let the environment in our family become one where Elena felt completely comfortable treating me as an embarrassment. And now, because someone whose opinion you find impressive has validated my work, you want to reclaim the pride you never actually offered. That is not fair, my father said. We have always wanted what was best for you. You have always wanted what looked best at the country club, I said. There is a real difference between those two things, and I have known the difference for a long time even when I was not brave enough to say it out loud. The elevator doors opened. I stepped out into the lobby. Turned back. I am going to the wedding, I said. Not because Elena wants me there, and not because it would look strange if I did not show up. I am going because Daniel and his family have treated me with more genuine respect in one evening than this family has managed in years. And I think it is important for me to be present for that. To let myself receive it. To remind myself that my worth is not determined by how this family has always seen me. I walked out through the lobby doors into the cool night air and I did not look back. The drive home was quiet. The city moved past the windows. I thought about Robert Morrison's business card sitting in my coat pocket. I thought about Catherine Park in the corridor. I thought about 28 years of corner seats and dinner tables and a crack in my chest that had been made by people who were supposed to protect it. And I thought about what it might feel like to finally, completely, stop waiting. The wedding was 3 weeks later at the Fairmont, exactly as Elena had planned. The grand ballroom was everything she had described. The flowers were extraordinary. The lighting was perfect. Elena was radiant in a way that was entirely and genuinely true, and whatever had passed between us, I was glad to be there to see it. I wore a simple dove gray dress. Appropriate, present, not drawing attention. During the reception I was seated at a table with several of Daniel's cousins, Priya among them, people I had met briefly at the rehearsal dinner and felt easy with. Not the head table. Not the corner either. Somewhere in the middle, which felt exactly right. Robert Morrison stopped by during dinner. Lauren. Good evening. He had the satisfied look of someone whose plans are proceeding well. I wanted to let you know formally that Apex submitted our bid for the Northern Signal expansion this afternoon. I put your name forward specifically as a potential lead consultant. If we are awarded the contract, I very much hope you will join our team. Several people at the table turned to look at me with open curiosity. I would be honored to be part of it, I said. Honor yourself, he said. You earned the conversation. He moved on, and Priya leaned over immediately. Did he just offer you a job? Potentially. If their bid is successful. That is extraordinary. What exactly is this satellite project? I explained it and found myself in the conversation I always loved, the one where the technical reality of the work and the human meaning of it came together, where I could talk about orbital mechanics and signal latency in the same breath as communities seeing their first broadband connection, children in remote areas accessing the same educational resources as children in cities. Across the room I could see my parents watching. My mother's face was complicated in the specific way of someone trying to reconcile two versions of their child into one. Elena circulated to our table during her rounds, the bride visiting her guests. She looked at me with something in her expression that was not quite apology and not quite acknowledgement but was reaching toward both. James, Robert Morrison, he has been talking about you all evening, she said, keeping her voice low. Diana, Catherine, keeps telling people about your project. It is. She stopped. It is your day, I said. Genuinely. It is a beautiful wedding, Elena. I am glad I am here. She looked at me for a moment with something unguarded in her face, the first unguarded thing I had seen from her in years. Then someone called her name from across the room and she was gone, back into the current of the evening. I watched her go and felt something quiet and complicated, not closure exactly, but the beginning of the conditions that make closure possible. Awe. Sometimes love for someone and hurt from someone and hope for something different all live in the same breath. That is the truth about families. They are rarely simple enough to resolve cleanly. Have you ever chosen to show up for someone even when they did not show up for you? Tell me why. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. 6 months after the wedding I accepted a position as lead systems architect at Apex Aerospace. The Northern Signal project expanded in scope and ambition and I found myself traveling in ways my work had never previously required, visiting remote communities across the country, meeting the people whose daily lives would be tangibly changed by what my team was building. Sitting in community centers in places where the nearest city was a 3-hour drive on roads that closed in winter. Talking to school teachers about what reliable internet access would mean for their students. Listening to healthcare workers describe what telemedicine could do for their patients if the connection were there to carry it. The satellite work had always been meaningful in the abstract, the way important work is meaningful when you are doing it inside a building surrounded by telemetry data. But those visits made it concrete in a way that changed me. Made the long hours feel different. Made the technical challenges feel personal in a new way. My relationship with my family did not transform. I want to be honest about that because the tidy version of this story would have everyone learning and growing and arriving at warm new understanding, and that is not quite what happened. What happened was slower and more partial and more real. My parents started asking questions about the project that were genuine rather than performative. Not every time, not without occasional backsliding into old patterns, but with a new quality of attention that had not been there before. My father called me one evening just to ask how the first test launch had gone. Not because anyone impressive was watching. Just because he wanted to know. Ah. That call. I sat with my phone after we hung up and held it in both hands for a moment, that small ordinary call that cost him something and meant more to me than the entire rehearsal dinner. Elena and I reached something. Not closeness, not yet, maybe not ever in the way I had sometimes imagined it. But civility that had some warmth in it. She stopped introducing me in that particular tone, the one that made my career sound like an eccentricity, and started saying my sister is an aerospace engineer the way you would say any true thing about a person you respected even if you did not fully understand them. Progress is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is just a sentence said differently. Catherine and Robert Morrison became something I had not expected. Unlikely mentors. People I could call with a difficult technical decision or a professional uncertainty. People whose opinion I had earned rather than inherited. There is a specific satisfaction in relationships built on demonstrated competence. They are sturdier than relationships built on obligation. 2 years after the rehearsal dinner at Olio, the first phase of Northern Signal went live. I was in a small community 400 kilometers north of anywhere most people had ever been, standing in a community center that smelled like wood heat and coffee, surrounded by people who had come together to witness a moment they had been told was coming but perhaps not entirely believed until now. A community liaison named Margaret, who had been working for years to advocate for connectivity infrastructure in the region, stood at the front of the room and talked about what this had meant to fight for. She had been patient, she said, because she had believed it was possible. And she had believed it was possible because of the people working on it. She looked at me when she said that. I want to tell you that I held it together. I did not hold it together. I stood in the back of that room and I wept, the quiet kind that happens when something you have worked toward for years becomes suddenly, completely real. And then the connection went live. The room was full of people on video calls within 90 seconds. A grandmother talking to her grandson in the city. A teenager showing her friend somewhere south a view of the northern sky. A doctor connecting to a specialist consultation that would have required a 6-hour drive the week before. I stood in the back of that room and watched it happen and felt something I have been trying to find words for ever since. Not triumph. Bigger than triumph. The specific feeling of having done the right work for the right reasons and lived long enough to see it matter. Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You are not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Because here is what that room in the north taught me. Not the technical lessons, not the professional ones, but the one that reached all the way down to something that had been hurting for 28 years. Your worth is not determined by other people's ability to see it. This is not a motivational phrase. It is a functional truth with real consequences. I spent the first 28 years of my life allowing my family's limited perception of my work to make me feel like the work itself was limited. I allowed their inability to understand what I was doing to make me feel like what I was doing was not worth understanding. I made myself smaller at corner seats and dinner tables because the people I loved most could not see what I was. But the satellite did not care whether my father thought it was glamorous. The communities connecting to the world for the first time did not care whether Elena found my career presentable. The orbital mechanics worked whether or not my Aunt Patricia could explain them to her friends. Real work is real regardless of who sees it. My parents flew north for the launch ceremony. It was my father's suggestion, which surprised me enough that I asked him twice if he was certain. He had never been this far north in his life. He found the travel uncomfortable and the accommodation basic and the landscape, I think, somewhat overwhelming in its scale and its silence. But he came. I watched my father on the second day of the visit, standing in the community center talking to a local elder about how the satellite system worked. He was using his hands the way he does when he is genuinely engaged, not performing engagement but actually inside it. The elder was explaining what connection meant for his grandchildren's education. My father was listening with the specific quality of listening that means you are being changed by what you hear. My mother was at a table in the corner, talking with Margaret, and at some point she quietly started crying. Not dramatically. Just the quiet overflow of someone who has understood something that they cannot ununderstand. I did not go to them. I let them have their moment without my commentary on it. Later that evening my father found me near the window looking out at the dark. He stood beside me for a moment. I did not understand, he said. What you were doing. What it meant. I know, Dad. I should have asked better questions. For a long time. Yes. You should have. He was quiet for another moment. Then he said, I am proud of you, Lauren. And I know I have not said it in the right ways, at the right times. But I am. I have been for longer than I made clear. I looked at the northern dark through the window and I let that sentence land where it needed to land. Thank you, I said. We stood together for a while without talking, which was its own kind of communication. Here is what I know now that I did not know at 28, sitting in the corner seat of a banquet hall trying to make myself small enough not to attract disappointment. You can spend your entire life trying to be seen by the people whose sight you grew up needing. You can shrink yourself, explain yourself, achieve yourself into exhaustion trying to build a version of your life that they will finally recognize as worth acknowledging. And some of them will never get there. Not because you have failed to be legible, but because their capacity to see is genuinely limited by the frame they have always used. That is not your failure. That is their limitation. And their limitation is not your ceiling. Build the work that matters. Do it for the reasons that survive all scrutiny, the real reasons, the communities connected for the first time, the problems solved that stayed solved, the things that work in the silence of space where no opinion can reach them. Surround yourself with people who see you before you prove anything to them. Those people exist. Catherine Park existed. Robert Morrison existed. Maya existed. Sometimes they come from unexpected directions, from a phone call at 7 in the morning, from a corridor conversation at someone else's rehearsal dinner, from a community center 400 kilometers north of anywhere. They are worth more than any amount of approval from people who will only offer it once you no longer need it. And if you are sitting at a corner table right now, making yourself small, waiting for someone to finally understand why your work matters, I want you to hear this. You do not need to wait. The work is real. You are real. Your worth is not a question pending someone else's answer. It was never pending anything. It was always already there. End of signal.